Hey, this is Khan, you're watching Ninja Pulls, and welcome to week 1 of the Update 47 PTS. This goes live on August 18th for PC, September 3rd for consoles. It's called Feast of Shadows, and features 2 brand new dungeons which look very cool, and the new world event, the Writhing Wall, something completely new for ESO. Lots more to come on all that. We'll be streaming the dungeons on Twitch and here on YouTube, as well as the Writhing Wall event, providing feedback and giving you all a heads up as to what to expect. But for now, let's rattle through the patch notes coming with Update 47. Before I start, I just want to remind everyone that this is not the final version of the combat system with subclassing, just as the last update was not the final version. The devs have said this is gonna take a while. Some of these things may not even make it to the live server. This is just week 1 of PTS, and even if they do, they're not set in stone. I actually think a lot of players might be a little surprised to see how light the patch notes are this time around. Gilliam says that balancing subclassing is the priority, but they don't want to rush it. So this update contains a few adjustments, largely aimed at correcting passive slot effects and ultimate generation, by converting many unique ultimate sources to the major and minor system. Let's start with that. Currently, all classes have a unique passive that generates ultimate when triggered. The value of these will not change, but rather than a unique source of ultimate, these will now grant minor or major heroism and generate the ultimate via these buffs. If you don't already have a source of heroism, this won't really affect you at all, but if you are already getting minor heroism from, say, Banner Bearer, Heroism Potions, or the Oaken Soul Ring, these sources become redundant. Now, of course, not everyone uses these things, and not everyone cares enough to trigger their Ultigen class passive on cooldown, but it is something I always try to incorporate into the suggested rotations in my DPS guides, and now there's a question mark over whether that's still worth doing. The passives themselves: Implacable Outcome from the Arcanist Soldier of Apocrypha, Mounted's Blessing from Dragonknight's Earthen Heart, Corpse Consumption from Necromancer's Living Death, Transfer from Nightblade's Siphoning, Prism from Templar's Dawn's Wrath, and Savage Beast from Warden's Animal Companions. They're all going to work the same as before, so don't worry about that. You trigger them in the same way, and the amount of ultimate you generate is either identical or slightly higher in a couple of cases, but it will arrive over multiple ticks rather than all in one go. Sorcerer famously doesn't have an Ultigen passive, it just gets cheaper ultimates, a passive which is theoretically equivalent to other classes, but which you don't need to trigger. You don't even need to know it's there, you just get the benefits for nothing, which I always thought was a little patronizing to Sorc players. The exception is Catalyst, the Nightblade's unique passive from Siphoning, which gives ult whenever you drink a potion. This now grants major heroism, so it won't tick out of combat, and it won't stack with sources like Pearls of Elnathay or Trample. Healers were already pretty upset that these two no longer stacked with each other, and now the Siphoning skill line joins them. As I understand it, the devs' goal here is to prevent us from stacking too many sources of Ultigen, and I can totally see why the devs would want to address this. It feeds the growing gap between organized groups and random groups, a gap which is already so massive that many would say there's no point playing with randoms beyond the chance to meet new people or when you're completely new to the game. The performance gap is so huge. Clearly, that's not an ideal situation, but if the devs are trying to rein in the endgame trial community, that is very, very difficult to do without also watering down the combat system for everyone else, and I'm a little worried that this might be exactly such an example. We shall see. It might work out fine that we just have a choice between our class Ultigen and another source of minor heroism. The Arcanist setups most of us have been using since subclassing came along often don't have any Ultigen passives at all, so we could just continue getting it from something like Banner. More on that later, but it does feel like a layer of complexity and player reward is being removed from the game, or at least weakened. I understand the move to unify class Ultigen passives, but for this to not dumb things down, it seems to me that either heroism should be made super rare, so these class passives are worth investing in and can really shine, or the class passives should be unified under a new and different Ultigen buff. so they cannot be stacked with each other, but they can still be stacked with major and minor heroism. I think that might be a neat compromise, and if the devs decide that Ultigen is still too high, make minor heroism tick every 2 seconds instead of every 1.5. I think ESO players can live with a power loss, especially after the massive power hike we got from subclassing. What we don't want is to lose the intricacy of the combat system and the sense of reward for mastering it. Again, we'll see how this works out, but for me, this is the change I am most concerned about. Moving on, Necromancer. Flameskull and its morphs were generating corpses that couldn't be replaced, getting you stuck at the summons cap and unable to summon blast bones and other stuff. That should now be fixed, thank goodness. Nightblade. Grim Focus now grants major prophecy and savagery instead of weapon and spell damage, and building up the stacks does nothing stat-wise. The Spectral Bow remains unchanged, except that Relentless Focus is now even cheaper and can be fired at 4 stacks rather than needing 5. Again, the reasons for this are pretty obvious. Since subclassing, everyone and their grandmother has been running around with Assassination and slotting Relentless Focus on the back bar for the free damage stats. We all knew a nerf was likely, but I was hoping they'd find a better way to do it. They can't really buff the bow proc because it's already a sore point in PvP, but it is sad to see one of the Nightblade's signature moves dumped in the bin like this. I really hope they can figure out a way to make it worth using again, maybe by reducing the amount of free stats per stack, make the stacks expire over time, maybe just buff the bow proc against monsters, or make it deal almost no damage to blocking targets. PvPers block a lot, but bosses tend not to. I don't know. This just feels like exactly the thing I was worried about when subclassing was announced. That all of our favorite signature moves that made classes fun and unique to play would get squashed because subclassing cannot tolerate outliers. Shadow Cloak got an interesting change. The Shadowy Disguise morph now grants minor protection instead of prophecy and savagery, and the Dark Cloak morph now gives you the bonus heal whenever you're blocking. This heal was considered OP a long time back and was changed to only heal for the full amount if you were standing still, a change which caused much amusement at the time. This is still quite a weird condition, but in PvE or PvP, there's often a good chance that you'll be blocking when you pop your burst heal, so this is potentially an interesting change. Sorcerer. Bound Armaments got a similar treatment to the Nightblade's Grim Focus. It now grants major savagery and prophecy instead of 8% extra stamina. The other morph, Bound Aegis, was changed to grant permanent major resolve, making it another freebie in the Sorcerer's toolkit. I can imagine players who are new to tanking or PvP might really enjoy this, but a lot of PvE tanks will continue to run the Warden's Frost Cloak as their default source of major resolve since it applies to the entire group. This change goes hand in hand with Hurricane and Boundless Storm losing the major resolve buff, which is a real bummer for me because I've been using the Storm Calling skill line quite a lot for solo stuff where I really want that buff, and Hurricane is a very handy way to get it. Both morphs now grant minor force instead. Dark Deal is losing minor force, but the minor berserk will now last 20 seconds up from 10. This all feels a bit like moving the furniture around in the Sorcerer toolkit, taking buffs and shuffling them around. I don't have any major objections to this, but obviously I hope they'll do more to these skill lines in future. It'd be great to be able to recommend Crystal Fragments again, such a fun spammable, but currently locked up in a skill line with little to no appeal for DPS. That's it for the class changes, so Arcanist, Dragonknight, Templar and Warden got no direct changes except for the Ultigen passive. Again, Gilliam has said this update would be light on class changes, so presumably more of that in update 48, but the Arcanist did get another indirect change. The class mastery script, when used with Banner Bearer, will now only generate Crux if you have none. Again, while it's obvious that the Arcanist was way too dominant in PvE under subclassing, and I understand they needed to do something, I'm really not sure this is the answer. To explain where I'm coming from, so many players got bored of Arcanist's low input gameplay just a few weeks after it launched with Necrom. I personally wasn't one of them, and I know plenty of people who love the chill but powerful feel of beaming everything to death, but I was never able to enjoy Arcanist gameplay the way I did with my Nightblade or my Necromancer, whose rotations are so much more interesting and rewarding to play. For me, and I think a lot of players who felt obliged to play Arcanist in ambitious groups, the banner kind of saved the class, introducing a somewhat random element into the rotation, a crux every 5 seconds, which did not really line up with our typical sequence of casts, giving us a little minigame to play in our heads during that long Fate Carver channel, and figuring out exactly what our next casts should be for maximum damage. Do we need to flail? Can we skip the flail? Etc. I don't care if that was an entirely deliberate genius move by the devs or just a happy accident. It was an awesome change to a class that always felt too easy and too powerful. I know 8 Puppies was a big cheerleader for this as well, and I think we've both tried to make the case that the other classes should maybe have their own class mastery scripts revisited to create other interesting interactions like this one. But no, unfortunately, we're losing it instead. Again, in the service of balance, which is a goal I support wholeheartedly, and I don't want to pretend for a minute that I know better than the folks who actually work on this game, but I can't help feeling there's gotta be a cooler alternative here. I personally don't even think class mastery is the problem. If there's a problem with the Arcanist right now, it's that Fate Carver is practically the answer to everything. You need Cleave? Fate Carver. You need Burst? Fate Carver. You need a fat shield? Fate Carver. You need amazing sustain? Fate Carver. You need great single target damage as well? Fate Carver. Oh, and what's that? You need excellent range and mobility? Guess what? Fate Carver. I do not want to see Arcanist or Fate Carver go in the bin either, but from all the evidence I can see, that seems to be the source of its dominance, not Banner Bearer and the free crux. And crucially, Banner Bearer is a thing that made it more interesting. Again, we don't care so much about the power, it's the intricacy of the combat system we don't want to say goodbye to. Also, Herald of the Tome generally is just a very strong skill line, packed with damage as opposed to some of the original class skill lines which are much more role agnostic with a blend of tanking, support, and damage tools. I guess those are all the big ones for this patch. There's plenty more to say, but if you can get on PTS and test these changes, please do it. And if the results are worrying to you, drop some feedback on the official forum thread or via the in-game tool. The devs don't get everything right, and neither do we, but all we can do is communicate our findings. At the end of the day, we all just want this game to be as fun as possible. Other combat changes include a couple of block bugs getting fixed, where if you restored resources while bracing, or if you bar swapped during a channel, your block could fail. Replenishing Barrier no longer restores Ultimate and other big blow to healers, but it restores more Magicka instead. RIP. Shooting Star, the Mages Guild ult, is a little cheaper, but now has its ultigen capped at 6 targets. So you can't hit dozens of enemies with it for massive ultigen, but that was kind of an edge case anyway. Combat Prayer was supposed to have a 0.4 second delay on its heal and buffs being applied. That is now active. The other morph, Blessing of Protection, had too much delay and will also be going down to 0.4 seconds going forward. Berserker Rage, the 2H ult, got its CC immunity fixed. Pet summons that fail to cast due to the summons cap should no longer take their resource cost, and there are a bunch of other smaller fixes too, which you can read about in the patch notes. Now for the sets. The new ones from the dungeons, as usual, look somewhat interesting, but don't look very likely to upend the meta. From Black Gem Foundry, we got the heavy set, Black Foundry Steel, which makes you block for free when you heavy attack. Maybe nice as a crutch for brand new tanks, but there are so many more valuable sets you could wear, and let's face it, if you can tank this new dungeon, chances are you've figured out how to heavy attack for resources already. The monster set, Black Gem Monstrosity, is kinda interesting. Casting a soul magic ability turns your next light or heavy attack against that target into a proc which deals damage based on their maximum health. Not sure how the numbers would stack up in practice, but that could be useful in PvP. The light set, Lustrous Soulwell, grants triple resource recovery to you and 3 allies whenever you ultimate. The medium set, Viscount's Soul Fury, grants Major Force, Major Berserk, or Major Courage for 12 seconds after a heavy attack. From Naj Kaldish, the monster set Barsaka creates a damaging AoE when you roll dodge, dealing damage based on your max health and granting you a damage shield. The heavy set Stonehulk Domination applies major vulnerability whenever you taunt. Although the cooldown is 3 seconds longer than the debuff, you could always extend it with Archdruid or Nazare. If you're in a situation where you're using Turning Tide against a single target, this might be an alternative, but the 2 to 4 piece stat lines aren't that great. The medium set, Tools of the Trapmaster, stacks up your light attacks up to 4 times, then lets you release them as a heavy attack proc, which hits your enemy with a blade and applies Sundered. Seems much too fiddly for PvE, but depending on the proc damage, might draw the attention of some PvPers. We'll see. The light set Zanmir Spellweaver is an Elementalist set, increasing your damage done with Flame, Shock, and Frost by 5%, and their status effects by 15%. Definitely a cool idea, but like the Elementalist concept in general, just because it sounds cool doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna work super well. We will see. The new rewards for the worthy sets are Medium, Coup de Grace, applying major vuln to immobilized enemies, Light, Spell Shredder, increasing damage for every shield and hot your target has, and Heavy, Unflinching Ultimate, gain 1 second of CC immunity for every 20 ult you've spent. Some interesting new sets for sure, but like I said, nothing to get super excited about from a PvE standpoint. There are also some pretty big changes to existing sets, and I'll spin through these very quickly, but the general gist with many of them is that stacking sets like Riptide or Berserking Warrior will now have an upfront base stat boost, so the 5-piece isn't completely dead when their conditions aren't fulfilled. And their ramping bonuses have also been adjusted for more consistency. Most of the changes aren't that dramatic, but some got nerfed, some got buffed, as you'd expect. Reliquien got a slight nerf of 2%, Barsei's Mania had its max bonus reduced from 12% to 10% damage, but it now caps out at 50% Magicka instead of 0%, making it way more viable if you're in need of a light trial set. Riptide got a bit of a nerf. Like Barsei, it now caps out at 50% stamina, but grants 29% less weapon and spell damage than it did. This set was already downgraded by proxy, with weapon and spell damage stats having gone up with subclassing, so a flat amount like this becomes proportionally less valuable, while a percentage boost like Unsul or Barsei rises in tandem and is unchanged. Berserking Warrior got a slight buff, with even more crit chance added to it, some of it up front. Siroria also got an upfront bonus and lower stats per stack to compensate. Yundir got its penline replaced with weapon and spell damage and got a slight buff at max stacks. Harmony and Chaos grants some stats up front and the stacks last a bit longer. Twice-Fanged Serpent had its penetration bonuses spread out a little bit. Non-ramping sets also got some changes. Highland Sentinel got a pretty big nerf, which is fine by me. I always thought this set was a little bit silly. It's now easier to keep up the stacks and the set will work in more fights, but the cap for the set is about 22.6% lower. Balorg now only works in combat. Rush of Agony will now pull enemies to the original target point and not to wherever the user is after the delayed activation. It will also leave a telegraph. Players using it in PvE hopefully won't notice much difference, but I guess the devs' hope is that ball groups using it in PvP won't find it quite as free as before. Caspian's Cruel Signet, the medium set from Ossian Cage, got its proc damage buffed by 32%, and the damage bonus now stays on you even after the proc fires, so it keeps getting stronger in fights that last long enough. I'll be interested to see if this set is finally worth using. I know the devs were keen on this one. Whirl of the Depths got a 3% buff to its proc damage. Roaring Opportunist got its penline deleted and changed to weapon and spell damage. That must be the final remnant for that time the devs insisted that this should be a damage set and not a support set. Recovery Convergence, the healing set from Ossian Cage, now lets you build stacks again after taking the synergy. Dolorous Arena, the heavy set from Ossian Cage, which reduces enemy armor around you, now lasts 5 seconds instead of 2, so you have more of a chance to keep up the stacks. Destructive Mage, the super old set we'd all forgotten about, which places a bomb on enemies when you heavy attack them, can now be used by multiple players against the same target. The cooldown got reduced, and the explosion now deals 13% more damage. If you've got a bunch of Rakat's Void Mantle enjoyers in your group, I wonder if this set is suddenly worth looking at again. We'll see. As for base game updates, we're getting swimming mounts, stacking survey reports, similar to Master Writs, the option to re-roll your visions in Infinite Archive in exchange for archival fortunes. This is a pretty major change if, like me, you've been frustrated by a bunch of really good archive runs where you get to Arc 3 or 4 with zero focused efforts and there's just no point continuing. There are some compass improvements coming as part of their continued UI revamp. We'll be getting another round of Cyrodiil Vengeance testing, though obviously this is months away and probably won't arrive until Update 47 has been live for a while, just like the last test. This version of Vengeance will switch on Mages and Fighters Guild skill lines, the 3 armor abilities, as well as Sky Shards, Mount Selection and Collectibles. Meatbag Catapults will also be back, although they'll just deal 1 tick of damage and not apply a ground dot. 2 new homes are coming, one of which is going to be free for everyone who collects their event tickets throughout the year, and the usual mountain of new cool furnishings. And of course, there's the Writhing Wall event and the new dungeons themselves. I hope I didn't miss anything, but either way, there's loads more stuff to come, analysis, new builds, and a full report from Ninjapools on the Writhing Wall, how it works, and what we think about it. And with that, I will say thank you to everyone who has supported Ninjapools so far this year, and who made Tenfest such an amazing experience over on Twitch. I've never seen anything like it. Maya and I have so much fun with you guys, and we're really trying to make this sustainable so we can keep doing it every year, and branch out and make more cool stuff for you. Support us if you can, in any way you can. We are massively grateful. More videos on the way, come say hi to us on Twitch if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.